Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to give you a breakdown and review of Joker, Folie, deux, which of course is the sequel to Joker, which was released in 2019. So as the film starts, it's 2 years after the events of Joker, and Arthur is in custody at Arkham State Hospital awaiting trial for the murders he committed. His lawyer plans to argue that Arthur has dissociative identity disorder and that his Joker personality is responsible for the crimes and not Arthur. At a music theory session that Arthur attends, he meets another patient, Harleen Lee Quinzel. She confides to Arthur that she grew up in the same neighborhood he did, had an abusive father who died in a car crash, and was imprisoned after burning down her parents' apartment building. Lee also expresses her admiration for the Joker's crimes and personality. Later, during a film screening attended by Arthur Lee and abusive asylum guard Jackie Sullivan, Lee starts a fire. Arthur and Lee are caught trying to escape, and Arthur is placed in solitary confinement. Lee visits him to say she's being released to avoid his influence, but promises to attend his trial, and they engage in a little waka waka after she applies his Joker makeup to his face. During an interview with the television personality Patty Myers, Arthur sings to Lee through the television screen, deepening her love for him. At the trial, Assistant DA Harvey Dent calls witnesses to dismiss Arthur's claims of insanity. During a break, Arthur's lawyer reveals that Lee was actually a psychiatry student who grew up in the Upper East Side and that her father, a doctor, is alive. She goes on to say that Harleen voluntarily committed herself to Arkham and then checked herself out and never burned down an apartment building. When Arthur confronts Lee about this, she confesses that she told some lies to get close to him, but also tells him that she's pregnant and has moved into his old apartment building to set up a home for them there, anticipating his release. At the trial the next day, Arthur dismisses his lawyer and represents himself. After bringing Arthur's former co-worker, Gary Puddles, and his neighbor Sophie to the stand, Dent rests his case. Arthur offers no defense, although he mentions the Arkham guards negatively. Upon returning to Arkham, he is taken to the bathroom and raped by Jackie and two other guards. In court the following day, during his closing argument speech, a devastated Arthur renounces the Joker persona, taking full responsibility for his actions. Furious, Lee storms out and the jury finds Arthur guilty of first-degree murder, as well as second-degree murder. As the foreman is reading this verdict, a car bomb explodes outside the courthouse, killing and injuring numerous attendees and scarring Harvey Dent's face. In the chaos, two followers of Arthur help him escape, but he soon runs from them. He wanders through Gotham and encounters Lee outside his old apartment, but she rejects him for renouncing his Joker persona and admits that her pregnancy was another lie before she leaves. The police apprehend Arthur and return him to Arkham. The next day, a patient approaches Arthur after a guard tells him that he has a visitor and he's on his way to see this visitor, and begins to tell him a joke before repeatedly stabbing Arthur in the stomach. As Arthur bleeds out, the patient who stabbed him carves a smile into his own face while laughing maniacally. And that's where the movie ended. So that's a very basic explanation of the events of the film, but there's a lot more to it than that, and you really have to see it to get the whole story and to feel what happens to this character and to Harley during the film, because that plot breakdown does not do it justice. That's just a blow by blow of the major events that occur. It doesn't tell you the story. So, what did I think of the film? Well, as I was watching it, I was really enjoying it because while I normally don't like Joaquin Phoenix, I loved him in The Joker, and he's fantastic in this movie. Just his physicality, his, the way he speaks, he's just fantastic in the movie. And like the first film, it does do a lot to examine the human condition and to examine mental illness and what it means to be emotionally disturbed and what it's like to try to survive in a society when you're like that. I think one thing that helped to do that was the earlier musical numbers. There are musical numbers that occur as fantasy in Arthur's mind, and there are musical numbers that occur in reality, like when he's singing in front of the reporter. That's a real moment that actually happens. But there are other times when the musical numbers are things he imagines, and some of them are imagined in real life situations, and some of them are imagined in fantasy settings. And I think the early musical numbers, more than the later ones, did a great job of helping to paint the picture of, a person going through what this character is going through, trying to survive with mental illness and emotional disturbance, and the weight of the problems that's caused him through life, and the weight of the choices that he's made in part because of those conditions. And it just does a really good job of depicting state of mind, and what it's like to be in those shoes, and you feel it. It's heavy, it's dark, but at the same time lighthearted, because some of the singing is about having hope and being loved and things like that, which everyone longs for. So it's just good stuff. Unfortunately, the movie, in my opinion, loses its way somewhere after the halfway point, because for one thing, it never really delves that much into the Harley Quinn character. She's used in this film in a very sort of surface way. You do sort of feel, the love between them, or the care between them, but there's not much of an examination of her character, which, on the one hand, you might say, well, that's okay because it's about Joker, and, this is about the Arthur Fleck character. It's not really about her, but it is called Folie à deux, and it is supposed to be about how the two of them mesh and or clash, depending on how you want to look at it. And the examination of her psyche and of her personality and of her trauma or whatever is just never realized. They never go into it. And I thought that was unfortunate. I thought it was an underuse of Lady Gaga's talents and an underuse of the character, really. So I thought that was unfortunate. I didn't like that some of the later musical numbers seemed to be in the movie more to demonstrate the fact that Arthur sort of had fantasies about what his life could be. And I don't think we needed as many of those as they put in the movie. So it seemed like they were putting them in to put them in. And, they're all very well done. He sings really well for a guy who, isn't a singer. And from what I understand, they recorded most of the singing live on set, if not all of it. I think some of it was obviously pre-recorded because they were dancing, and there's no way that they did those dances in one take every time. And so the continuous singing track had to have been edited. And so I don't think it was all live singing in those sequences. But anyway, I think, given that some of the sequences were live on set, he sang well, and he came off as a character who isn't a singer, which is great because the character isn't a singer. Lady Gaga, of course, was excellent with the singing, but I thought that some of the numbers were unnecessary, and that they went on too long. Some of them went on way longer than they needed to. And, to hear me say that is a thing, because I like musicals and I like singing in my TV shows and movies. So to hear me say, well, this was gratuitous and went on too long, then it's true. They made a big deal in this movie about the fact that he's two people and that he's sick, and that, Joker committed the crimes and not Arthur, but you never show him getting any treatment. And that would have been a great opportunity for them to examine, even more than they did, what goes into making someone like Arthur, because there are people like him in the real world. And it just would have been a great opportunity to sort of explore those things more than they did. And they just didn't do it with either character. In the end, which I thought was a good thing, Arthur says, no, the Joker is not the real me. Because in the first movie, the real him is the Joker, right? He says, no, I'm not Arthur, I'm the Joker. And he lets that sort of personality or aspect of his personality sort of take over and supplant who he really is. And at the end of this, when, through the whole movie, his lawyer is trying to sell this idea that he's two people, and that the Joker did the crimes and not Arthur. He finally ends up saying, no, that's not the case. There is no Joker. There's just me, and I did these things, which I think is right for the character, and which I think is good for a person in his situation to admit that they're emotionally disturbed and that they have some mental illnesses that need treatment, but not so much that they're two people if they aren't. And I think he came to feel as though he was being shoved into a box that he didn't want to be in, and he rebelled against that. And I thought that was good. I think it's good to not feed into delusions when you are mentally ill to some degree. You don't want to compound that by feeding into delusions and making departures from reality that won't ultimately serve your being made well. So I liked that. But what they then did was they made it where they painted Harley Quinn as this person who, and you can see it going back through the movie because at one point she tells him you got to get off your meds because she doesn't really care for Arthur. She cares for the Joker. And Arthur never understands that throughout the movie, and really the audience doesn't. But looking back, you can see where she really just got off on him being the persona. And she kind of does say, you're Joker, and I wanted to come to meet Joker. But you don't get the sense until the end that she separates him from Arthur and that she doesn't care for Arthur at all, only the Joker. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that that's where it went because I don't know, it's just sad. I didn't like that. I wanted her to be true to him in the end. And I had no illusions that he was going to get out but it would have been great if they kept them together and if she hadn't been painted as this person who was herself so mentally ill that she fell in love with a persona that doesn't really exist and that she in fact manipulated him into being that character that she thought was real versus just himself. And so I didn't like that. It made me feel badly. So I didn't love that. And I don't think it's true to the character of Harley Quinn really. So yeah, I enjoyed watching this film as it was unfolding. I thought they were going in a good direction. I liked Joaquin Phoenix's performance a great deal, and I still liked his performance by the end, but I don't like the narrative choices that they made once they got to a certain point, or for that matter, choices they didn't make. And I didn't think all of the musical numbers were necessary. I thought they went on too long, and I didn't like where they went with the story in the end. So that's, my analysis of the film. That's how I feel about the film. I enjoyed watching it, but in the end, I was disappointed. Interestingly, there's some things they left sort of up to the viewer to decide. At least it seemed that way to me. Was she really pregnant? Because she says she is, and then at the end, not. But which one of those two things was the truth? Because it could go either way, right? She could have said she was pregnant when she wasn't to manipulate him, but then she may really have been and only indicated otherwise because she was trying to cut ties with him. She basically, she straight up tells him, I only wanted you for the fantasy and you gave it up, which is awful. But would that have been a reason for her to say she wasn't pregnant when she still was? So we don't know. Also, at the end, Arthur is told that he has a visitor after she rejects him, and you don't get to see who the visitor was. So, was it her? Did she come back to say, I'm sorry, I do actually love you, and I was wrong for what I said, and I'm going to stick with you, and hopefully you don't get the death penalty, and we'll make the best of this relationship with you still inside. But the answer is we don't know. I'd like to think that that's what happened, but we don't know because he's on the floor bleeding out before he gets to who the visitor was. The thing is, we also don't know if there actually was a visitor because it seems to me it's possible that the guard arranged to take him out of the community room that he was in watching TV to get him in a place where he was alone so that the other patient could kill him. And I think that because the guard never comes back. The guard goes around a corner. Arthur is supposed to be following him, and the other prisoner approaches and stops him, and the guard never comes back to say, hey, Fleck, where are you? What are you doing? Come on, you can't be lagging behind me. Let's go. Never comes back. And so the whole attack takes place and he's left there bleeding out while the other guy's laughing maniacally. The guard never comes back. So I'm not even sure there was a visitor, and I'm not sure that the guard wasn't in on what happened, but we don't know. So that's interesting. The other thing is, will there be a Joker 3? Now, I don't think there needs to be one. I would say that unless they're going to do things differently than they did in this one, that they shouldn't make a third one. But is Arthur dead? Because, he gets stabbed pretty good in the gut, and you can certainly die from that. You can bleed out, especially if they get the iliac artery. But of course, people can also survive wounds like that, especially if they don't get the iliac artery, if attention gets to them soon, which again, you never see the guard come back, but they could make another one and say that the guard did finally go back just in time. And so it's possible we'll see a third one. I think it'll depend on how this does. And from what I'm reading, it's not doing well and it's not being received well. So I think other people are finding some of the issues with it that I found. And I'm disappointed. I am because I really liked the first film. I really liked the first half of this film, and I thought they were going somewhere, but they didn't, and it's unfortunate, and I think it's hurting the movie. Of course, because there were fan previews on Monday for this film, the Monday before it came out, this past Monday, and of course, because it was in previews yesterday, somebody shot the whole thing off the screen and it's up on one pirate site. It's probably up on more than one by now, but I found it on one. And, that's probably not helping the box office either. At my screening, there was myself, my wife, and one other person, but it was 11 o'clock in the morning. So I don't know if that means anything. But, certainly if people were chomping at the bit to see this, there would have been more people there. So that's not good. So I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a third one. There probably won't. Will there be Oscar nominations this time around? Maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't, although he did a great job, Joaquin Phoenix. He really did. And I don't like him. So coming from me, that's high praise. The only other thing I want to talk about really quick is that in the beginning of this movie, there's a cartoon sequence called Me and My Shadow, and I hated every second of it. So I don't know why they did it. But yeah, there's that too. And it's just, I didn't like that. But anyway, that's really all I have to say about the movie. I'd love to discuss it with you folks in the comments. So, drop a comment, tell me what you thought of the movie, tell me what you think of what I thought of the movie, and let's have a conversation. For now, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.